understand this kind of stuff is pretty boring. Okay guys, this is a very important video. This is for upgrading the firmware on your Thor 300 to the latest version, which as of making the video on the 1st of September 2024 is version 6.05. For any other versions, anything else in the future, this video might not apply. For the latest information, you should go on to the fungineers.us web store, go to user guides, and there should be a firmware user guide, which will always have the latest information. For example, if you're watching this video 2 years in advance, in 2026, you should perhaps go to fungineers.us and see which one is the latest firmware. As of today, the latest firmware which has been released is firmware 6.05. And who is this video for? This video is mainly for people who bought the complete Fungineers kit or the complete Fungineers box or the Thor 300 standalone. So you guys are better off just doing a fresh start and starting from firmware 6.05. Now, what does that mean? How to do that? We're going to go through that in a moment. For those of you who already have a running board, there are certain advantages to do this. However, it might not be completely necessary, but it doesn't hurt to do this if you do it properly. Which brings me to the point. Please fight the urge to skip video or skip parts of this video. I understand this kind of stuff is pretty boring. It's boring for me too. But please watch the video in its entirety. So what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly open a brand new Thor. If you have a complete box, you don't need to take the Thor out. You can just switch on the complete box or your existing controller box, and you should be able to do this. So this is the Thor. I'm going to power it up with my power supply. This button should be in your complete controller box and should also be provided along with the Thor. So go ahead, connect power to your Thor and press this button, and the Thor should light up. It might beep because it has some firmware, and you have the VESC tool downloaded. Now we want to upgrade our VESC from 6.02 to 6.05. Now pause here for a second. If you have an Android as of today, the Android app has been updated to the latest version. You can see that by going to About, it says 6.05. If you have an iPhone, as of today, the App Store has not been updated with the latest version, which is 6.05. I've been told by Vetter and other sources that it's in the works. It should be done in the next few weeks. So if you have an iPhone, you can wait a few weeks. There's nothing you're missing out. I'm on my Android, and we are gonna connect to our Thor. Now, since I'm on the previous version, which you should be if you bought a Thor at this point, as soon as I open my VESC tool and I enable Bluetooth and my location, I should be seeing the Thor 300 VESC Express here, right? So if I were to hit connect, you should see the blue light go on, and now I'm connected. Now, this is the important part. This is the reason I'm making this video, is because at this point, on the previous versions, you are not connected to the Thor. You are connected to this little thing, which is the VESC Express. On the newer versions, connect directly to VESC Express, scan the CAN bus, and connect directly to Thor without you having to do it. And this could be a dangerous situation, because if you are connected to the VESC Express right now, and you go ahead and update the firmware, you will be updating the Thor VESC firmware onto the VESC Express. So basically, you're gonna be updating the firmware of the Thor on this thing, which will completely make this thing go mad and not connect to the Thor, leading to all kinds of issues, which can be fixed, but we don't want to have those issues, right? So the first thing you want to do once you're connected, let's go back again, right? So I'm going to connect back to the VESC like that in the VESC tool. Now we need to check, first thing is whether we are connected to the Thor or the VESC Express. If you have the firmware that you got from the factory at this moment, it's more than likely that you are still connected to the VESC Express. The way we find that out, there's a couple of ways to find that out, but one of the ways to find that out is go to update firmware and see what hardware you're connected to. Now you see here, you are actually still connected to the VESC Express. So we're not gonna upload the firmware on the VESC Express. We're gonna hit CAN scan, and then it shows us that on the CAN bus, we have two devices connected. One is a VESC Express that we are currently connected to, and there's a Thor300. Now I see Thor300 v.04, so now I'm sure that this one has an older firmware for 6.02. So I'm gonna go ahead and click this here, say okay, and now I should be connected to the Thor finally. Now we're gonna check that again, just to ensure that we're connected to the correct hardware. So I'm gonna go to update firmware, and I see that my hardware is now Thor300. So before we were connected to the VESC Express, now we are connected to the Thor finally. These 2 minutes are very crucial because we've had people who don't connect to Thor, just connect to the VESC Express, upload the wrong firmware, which is meant for the Thor. They upload it on the VESC Express, and then the VESC Express refuses to be connected, and it has to be reflashed with the new firmware using USB, and it just becomes a whole big mess. So again, and see that you are actually connected to the Thor. If you are not connected to the Thor, if you're connected to the VESC Express, go to CAN and go to scan, and then once you see the Thor here, connect to the Thor, click anywhere on this, and go back to update firmware until you see Thor300. All right, now we're connected to Thor, and now we want to update to the latest firmware. Now, before we go on uploading it, if you are an existing user, which means you already have your board up and running, you don't want to lose your configs. You might have configured the motor a certain way, your IMU is configured a certain way, there is float package which has all your settings, right? So you're gonna go ahead and say backup configs and click OK. If you're a new user, you haven't configured your board yet, you haven't configured your VESC yet, you don't need to back up any configs because you don't have any. In that case, you're gonna go ahead and set up your motor and IMU and refloat configs using the setup video, which is separate from this video. This is just a firmware update video. All right, now that we're ready to update the firmware, we have backed up our configs if there were any. We are sure that we are connected to Thor300. I'm gonna go ahead and upload the firmware, but before that, a very important step. If you don't do this step, if you just go ahead and update the firmware will not take effect, and you will still see Thor300 v.04. If that's happening to you, it means you're missing this step that we're about to do. So it's very important before we upload the firmware, we upload a bootloader. So I'm going to go to the bootloader tab here, leave this as generic. There are no other options anyway. And in the bootloader tab, we're just going to hit upload. Okay, this should take a second. I've got my bootloader uploaded. Now the bootloader enables us to upload the new firmware. So I'm going to go back to custom, and now we're going to finally upload the firmware. So I'm going to go to choose file and get the file that I have downloaded from the link in the description of the video. Or if you are following the user guide, there should be a step before that where it says download the latest firmware. So if you've downloaded the latest firmware from either the link in the description of the video or from the link in the user guide, you should go to choose file, and in your computer, choose that file. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and then I see the file here, and I'm going to click upload. Now note, your firmware right now is 6.02, which is the previous one, and your hardware is Thor300 v.04. Once you upload the latest firmware, both of these should change. So let's go ahead, click upload, click OK, and wait for about 1 minute for this to be completed. In the meantime, leave your phone as it is, make sure it's on full charge, leave your Thor connected. Make sure it doesn't disconnect, because if anything were to happen at this point, you are most likely going to brick your Thor, which has to be unbricked by uploading the firmware using an ST-Link. Okay, the firmware upload is almost done. It helps if you keep your phone close to the Thor300. And once it's done, Thor is going to shut off. You're going to see these lights go off, and you're going to see the connection disappear, and then it's going to reboot after about 20 seconds. So the Thor is off now, and there is no connection. And after about 20 seconds, the lights are going to come on. There you go. So the green light is the Thor coming on. And if you rescan, you should see the Thor here and connect. Okay, now we are connected to the VESC Express. You can see that again by saying update firmware. And you see that you're still on VESC Express. So I'm going to go to CAN. And you see that this now says Thor300 instead of Thor300 V04. So now I'm connected to Thor. And if I go to the firmware section, you now see that you are on V6.05. Congratulations. And your hardware is Thor300. That means your firmware has been successfully updated. You get to enjoy all the benefits of the latest and greatest firmware.